Hey, thanks for tuning into the Overwatch channel. I've got Mario and Anthony from NIA. Good morning, guys. How are you?
Good morning. Thank you for having us.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good. Awesome, guys. So, Overwatch channel, we're talking about all things commercial property related. And Mario, Anthony, thanks for joining me. I know you guys flew out from Miami. How was the flight?
Flight was good. It
was good.
You know, we had to wake up early. You know, but that's nice. It's always good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very positive. We like coming to Colorado. You know, it's nice here. It's beautiful. Scenery's wonderful. So yeah, we enjoy it.
Weather's better here, man. It's so hot in Miami.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, you guys had that humidity out there, too.
I don't mind the humidity. I actually don't mind. I don't know about you.
Really?
In a suit, it's brutal.
Yeah.
But dryness.
I don't mind the humidity when I'm indoors. You know,
Right.
not when I
Yeah,
go
yeah,
outside.
yeah.
Then it sucks.
Yeah, I'll tell you, the humidity for me, I've got the long Italian locks, and I go
There you
out
go.
there and 45 minutes outside, man, I've got an afro.
Yeah,
Right,
right. I
exactly.
bet.
And I mean, hey, like, you know, for some people it's cool. Me, not a huge fan of that. But
No.
so guys, go ahead, tell us a little bit about you, about the firm. You know, what's going on, what you do, and you know, all that fun stuff.
We'll start.
Sure. You know, so we are full service end-to-end property insurance litigation firm. We do the whole shebang, not just the litigation. We're 22 lawyers across the nation, 125 members, and this is just what we do. You know, I've been litigating these cases for about 10 years. We've got members that have been doing this for 30 years plus. It's what we enjoy. You know, we've grown to love and understand the subject matter. And when you understand the subject matter, it gives you such an advantage in the context of litigation. You know, we've held on to that. Yeah.
Beautiful. Is it just for insurance stuff, or is it just all sorts of commercial property? You know, like somebody does a slip and fall, or is it other across the board? Or
No, we do just insurance stuff.
property
It's all
insurance.
property insurance. Yeah. So you're there's a lot of residential, a lot of large loss. You know, there's some kind of damage, and we'll get brought in at different points in time. So we'll often sometimes get brought in right at the beginning, where we're just going to manage the entire claim. But we'll see a lot of business come to us after a public adjuster has taken it. They've done their best. Carrier's still refusing to issue payment, and then they bring us in. You know, there's a lot that we can do. You know, once we get our hands on it.
Of course, yeah. I mean, you got to get all the data, and obviously, the sooner you get involved, the better. I mean, I've been doing this for a couple of years myself, and I know that there's some property owners that I work with, and you know, to their credit, it's like, hey, you know, I want to handle this myself. We're going to be good to go.
Yeah.
And sometimes, you know, hey, it works out. I mean, I had one owner in Des Moines, Iowa. You know, and it was like one of the first commercial. This is years ago. First commercial claims that I did, and the guy's like, you know, hey, I'm going to file a commercial claim. I need a contractor, so we connected. And he calls me back that evening. He goes, hey, the adjuster appointment's tomorrow. I need you to be there. I'm like, okay. So I show up. The guy, he inspects the roof, and he says, okay, cool. Well, here's a check for $160,000 to get you started.
Whew.
Like that, right?
Nice.
Now, that is not common.
That is a
Yeah.
complete anomaly.
Not
A complete anomaly.
Exception.
Right, but then there's also been a couple of them where I've got one in Omaha, Nebraska. That's a larger one that's been going on for 2 years, and you know they know their broker, they know their carrier, they're friends with them, all this fun stuff, but they're having difficulty getting the proper amount, you know, to be able to cover all the things, especially the way that they want to do it. Right, I mean they've got vinyl back drapes insulation on the inside that they want to get taken care of. You know, they do manufacturing on the inside, so they're going to want to stay open during this. So we've got to secure the interior envelope. It's a highly complicated thing. You know, but with getting you guys involved up front, a lot of times with the regulations, all the stuff, it kind of levels the playing field across the board.
Oh yeah, you know, I remember when I first started in the industry, and I was understanding how this operates. I didn't understand why I had a job. Like, it didn't make sense to me. And I remember I would ask myself, why would somebody hire me to help them deal with their insurance company? Why can't they just call their insurance company and file their claim? Insurance company's going to come and pay it. Why would they pay me anything? And then you slowly begin to see how the industry actually operates, right? Like, you know, and this is, I think, at the cornerstone or the key you know, issue is insurance companies are for-profit companies. Like, this is not a non-for-profit. You know, and when you study the law like we have, you learn of a principle, which is that if you run a for-profit company, you have an obligation to increase profits for your shareholders. That is your duty. So if that's the duty of the insurance company, that means that right from the get-go, they are incentivized to do everything possible to not pay or to pay as little as humanly possible.
Right.
And in some states, it's even worse. Like what we see in Florida, it's insane. In Florida, there's no such thing. You're never going to open a claim and get what you're entitled to right off the bat. A tornado took the entire building. It doesn't matter.
What do you think is the special thing or the unique thing about Florida that allows for that to happen?
Honestly, I think it's just over the years it's gotten more and more contentious and then more litigious, and then insurance companies just get stubborn. They get stubborn and it sort of falls into it. Like
Really?
you go into some states and it's like a miracle. You get some adjuster who's like, oh yeah, like I'll pay for this. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? That's great, you know.
Yeah, nice change of pace.
It's like, oh, you're gonna do
super
your
nice.
job. You're gonna do the right thing right from the get go.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
This is, and that's really it. I think it's been. You have a lot of bad actors. You have so many years of contention, and insurance companies have taken a demeanor where everything is fraud, everything's false, everything's defective installation, everything's wear and tear. Right? There's no legitimate reason to pay anything. So they go into it like that, and that's a big problem because your perspective drives the outcome. So if that's the perspective of an adjuster in Florida, and they get to a building. They're looking for the wear and tear. They're looking for the faulty, defective installation aspect to just pin it on that, right? And then I also think there's a lot happening in the background. You know, carriers don't want to pay up front. It must be that carriers do better by not paying, delaying that obligation. And now Florida now is a state where you don't get attorney's fees for suing on this stuff. So, you know, if a carrier owes $1 million today and they don't pay it today, they want to fight it out, and it takes us 3 years to pay it. Well, in 3 years, they still end up just paying $1 million. Yeah, the bad faith laws in Florida, you know, they're nothing. It's not like Colorado. Here you have way more flexibility. You can't play that game. In Florida, you can wait. You can let them sue me. I'll do 3 years, and maybe some of these reserves that are invested on the back end are going to yield, you know, some kind of revenue from interest, and then maybe that interest pays off the obligation. There has to be a financial incentive behind denying something that blatantly should not be denied.
Understood. Yeah, 100%. And you know, generally any type of major decision that's made like that is going to have some type of financial backing to it.
Must.
And do you think that you know, because in the hurricane seasons over the last couple of years have been kind of rampant. We had a little bit of a lull. You know, 2020 was pretty bad. Then it started. You know, we had a little bit of time. Then we had Ian, which was just. I mean, I know you guys got it. We both had a lot of stuff out in Ian, and there's a couple of them right now. One of them, our client just got a settlement on. You know, after 18 months, right? It's pretty crazy. Do you think that the amount of hurricane? Because obviously, you know, you look at an insurance company, they are there to mitigate risk, right? Yeah. So, you know, the higher the risk, the more difficult it is to get an insurance policy, the more difficult it is to get payout, all that fun stuff. You know, do you think that with the hurricane season that's coming up, which I'm not sure if you guys have been paying attention to? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah,
what are you guys seeing?
Well, you know, we were talking about the humidity in Florida, and you know, I was just telling Anthony that you can almost feel it in the air that a storm is coming.
Really?
Because we're ending of May, and usually it's not as hot and humid, you know, at this time of the year as it is now. Now you're stepping outside, it feels like we're in August. So, and that makes me wonder what August is going to be like, right? And they're predicting it's going to be one of the most overactive storm seasons that Florida has seen in history, right? And this seems to be a recurring pattern because we heard the same thing, you know, last year, and it was starting to ramp up, and we saw a lot of tropical storms. We did see a few hurricanes. Now this year we're seeing it again. They're saying it's going to be even worse. You know, so I definitely believe that is it's influential. Carriers are concerned,
and I worry. I worry for property owners because they're never going to pay. They're never going to get 100% of their damages paid by the insurance company, right? Especially now that it's done away with the attorney's fees. That right there.
Is that a recent change?
That was
2000. It was at the ending of 2022, December of 22, special legislative session. So 23 was the first year where you really saw that, you know, and now it's, you know, now it's everywhere. Now every policy essentially there's no attorney's fees.
And it's based on the policy. So like the last storm you were going to get attorney's fees on was Ian.
Yep.
And that's it. So now if you have to go into litigation, you know, average attorney charges 30%, 33%. If they have that damage, they're going to have to incur that with the attorney. They're going to have to pay that out of pocket.
Right. Interesting.
Which is a problem.
Is that something where, like, if the insured is going through and they're shopping for policies, you can elect, say, hey, look, you know, I've got a broker and I'm working with Lloyd's of London, whoever I'm working with, and it's like, you know, can I pay extra to not have that?
Unfortunately, not anymore. You know, this is now based on the new legislation. At least in Florida, it's not possible. And in many of the other states, Anthony and I practice across a number of states. I think we have like 27 that we're involved in. And just across the board, you know, it seems to be the case. It's driven by the legislature, not driven by the policy too much. You know, this is in Florida, the policy controls because you had attorney's fees when Ian hit. Ian hit in September of 22. And what you saw then, it was a frenzy. The legislature really started to freak out, so they called a special legislative session in December, just a few months after Ian. And in December, they got rid of it. You know, and during these legislative hearings, the Speaker of the House for Florida gets asked this question. It gets put on the spot. You know, and you had a lot of legislator members that were there that said, hey, my house was hit. Are you telling me if the insurance company doesn't pay me that, you know, I'm not going to be able to get my attorney's fees reimbursed?
Oh, boy.
And the Speaker said it in, you know, an open court on the record. I keep the transcript with me now to show it to judges.
Like, as a matter of fact.
It's like, right, you know. Speaker says, no, you know, and I forgot he addressed the senator and he said, no, sir, you know, this is not going to impact you. It's going to impact policy. policies that are sold after this day,
Yeah.
right? So if you got lucky and you owned a policy before the law changed and then you had a loss, great, you have recourse. But any new policy issued after that,
And now, by new policy, does that also mean renewing of the same policy?
yes, that's a new policy.
Okay.
That's already a new policy.
Yeah, so you're in trouble either way.
You're in trouble. Yeah.
So what are some of the things that, being, because I've got family, my uncle has a condo down in Marco Island. I've got my two of my cousins. Actually, I think you guys looked at this policy
Yeah, we did.
today for John. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So he's got a home out in Naples. My cousin Kimmy, she's got a home out in Naples. If I'm a homeowner, if I'm a commercial property owner, what are some of the things that I would want to do to, I guess, because there's not really anything you can do to protect about that, but let's say that I go into a situation where I do have a potential loss. Leading up until that point, is there some type of best practices that I could experience?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would say keeping a record of your property, the condition of your property, inspecting it before a storm, like you guys do your Overwatch program. I mean, that is the best thing that you could do to make sure that the insurance company is going to pay for the full amount. To hopefully that you don't need an attorney. Because if you can show before and you show them the pictures, the report that says this is what my property looked like before the storm, this is what it looked like after, and if the insurance company still says no, that looks like bad faith. That looks bad.
That was exactly what I was going to say. I think that when we think about the concept of an Overwatch program, it really boils down to how do you win every time. And this is what you have to do. You have to really position yourself to have superior leverage against the carrier. And that means that you need to have a baseline report of your property before the fact. You need to anticipate what carriers are going to do and then prepare for them in advance. A carrier is going to say that your roof wasn't improperly installed. A carrier is going to say that the wear and tear is the reason for the damage to your roofing system. A carrier is going to say the damages are pre-existing in some format. So it's storm season, it's coming, and you take proactive action. You get on the roof, right? Maybe even have a roofing inspection confirmed by somebody who's a professional that can say, there's nothing wrong here. The roof is fine. You have no interior leakage. You do a thermal imaging on the inside to show no elevated moisture, right? This is it won't show elevated moisture, but it'll show, temperature, right?
Temperature
And then you can
variation.
confirm that with a moisture meter to verify that there's no elevated moisture. You have this in advance. You're ready. What's this carrier going to say? You've got a storm that caused damage to your property, and you're going to present it now to the carrier. The carrier is they're without power.
Yeah.
But the tricky part is that nobody sees this. Nobody realizes how important it is to prepare for this until they're in the middle of a problem and they're expecting that the insurance company is going to write a check, and then they learn that that's not coming.
Yeah, I kind of look at it because I spent a lot of time in the automotive industry. It was 14 years, whether it was working on cars, doing off-the-road equipment, tires. I ran a fleet of up to, I think it was 14 service trucks and 3 boom trucks, and the way I kind of look at it is maintaining your vehicle, right? So, if I've got an extended warranty on my vehicle and it's going to go till 100,000 miles and something goes haywire at 60 or 70,000 miles, first thing you say is, hey, let me see your service records.
Yeah.
Have you been going by the dealer's manufacturer's specifications? Have you been every 60,000 miles? Are you getting your pan dropped and doing your new filter? Are you doing oil changes every 3,000 or 5,000 miles? Are you, the same thing with the compressors? I have a lot of problems with the compressors. Are you guys changing oils on these? Are you doing the filters? Are you doing all this stuff? And there's been a lot of situations before I was a little bit more educated where I was costing the company a lot of money. And I kind of look at it as like it's an out of sight, out of mind type of thing, right? I mean, not many people are thinking about their roof until it starts leaking.
Right.
And generally speaking, unless you have some type of really freak accident, whether it's a hurricane or a derecho or something that, gorilla hail, 4-inch hail, which we've had, I think 6 or 7 storms like that already this year. I mean, just in Texas. Omaha actually got hit with 3.5.
Oh,
last
that's
night.
crazy,
I saw
insane.
that.
Yeah. But you don't really start experiencing leaking right away.
Yeah.
Right.
You don't, right? And so this is going to happen. And I've gone through. We've gone in after a storm. We're talking with property owners to say, there's been a weather event that's impacted the roof. We're just here to check it out, make sure you guys haven't sustained any damage. All the typical door knocker stuff that we've all done, right? And the first thing is I don't have any leaks.
Yeah.
And
Right.
you can't just be like, well, obviously, like that's,
Yeah.
it's like, I completely understand, but we're looking for the exterior, not the interior. This is something that's going to occur over 2, 3, 4 different years. If you've got a metal roof, you could have an R-panel roofing system, and the panels actually get bent up. Okay, so over time, wind-driven rain's going to go underneath. It's going to go through the substrate, get through the decking. Then you've got your insulation. Then you've got your drop tile. Then it's going to get inside.
Right.
It's not going to be something that happens overnight.
And what people don't understand is that if they don't take action immediately after the event, by the time that they're noticing it, it's too late.
Yeah.
Now you have what's called a prejudice defense. And these carriers love to take advantage of a prejudice defense. They'll say, oh, well, you've waited too long. If the event occurred whatever time ago, this is now we've been prejudiced. It took so long for us to get out here, we can't confirm that. So you've lost your ability to, to receive coverage. This is...
Or what you have in Texas, where you have to differentiate between damage, right? So in Texas, where you have hailstorms multiple times a year.
Yes.
The insurance company will always deny, say, no, this wasn't caused by this one, it was caused by another storm that happened 2 years ago. And you have to actually hire an engineer to be able to differentiate. It's extremely difficult to do that, right? And Overwatch would help tremendously because no, this is what it looked like 3 months ago,
right?
Or less than 12 months ago,
right?
Because there you actually have to do it. It's insane.
And it's not even a sale. It just objectively is what you need. This is if you are a building owner, president of HOA, or even if you're just a residential homeowner, and you expect that in the event of a storm, your carrier is going to pay for your roofing system. You are obliged. You must document everything objectively with a roofing contractor, with an engineer, in advance of a storm. And you should renew that every single year so that when that storm gets there, you have all the evidence that you need in order to secure recovery. Yeah. And these Overwatch programs, I like them because it doesn't cost them anything. Right. And a lot of these homeowners or these building owners, they think, oh, what's the catch? What are you trying to sell me on? And it's like, and yes, there's a sale here, right? We're trying to make money, right? We want to make you money so that we can make money. Of course. But we're trying to put you in the absolute best position to ensure that you do get what you need. That's right. Right. Yeah. And that's why this free service is being offered on the front end.
Yeah.
You brought up a good point. Insurance companies do discriminate a little bit between regular property owners and HOAs, for example. One thing we'll get requested all the time if it's an HOA is maintenance records. Oh, yeah. You're never going to get a maintenance record request from a property or from a homeowner. Really? Right? But HOAs, you will almost every time, right? Because they're expected to maintain a record of the condition of the property.
Interesting.
They're looking. The carrier will get there and they're looking to find a way to avoid it. So, okay, well, it's kind of like if you get into a car accident and then you sue the person that hit you. They hire lawyers. What's the lawyer going to do? Well, he's going to ask for your medical records. He wants to see, have you ever came in or gone to the doctor to complain about back pain, right? And if on your medical records you complain about back pain, well, yeah, sure, I slammed into you while you were stopped at a red light, but we have a pre-existing condition. And now you have a problem. Right? It's almost like you need to go talk to that doctor and verify this back pain is associated to this, and it's limited to this, right? And now you're able to show that you have an increased injury as a result of that negligence. That's so much harder to do when you're not thinking about it in advance. Carriers play the same game, and that's how they gain leverage over humans.
What's really interesting is that, my fiance, I call her wife, fiance, we've been together for so long, we had a kid on the way. Congratulations, I know that you're due a week after me?
4 days.
4 days after me.
We got this.
Yeah, we got this, dude.
God bless you both.
Girl dads unite. Let's go.
Oh, man.
But I obviously I've been in the contracting end of things for quite a while now. As far as fixing the roofs, and I run into clients that have very similar situations. I don't understand. I'll tell you what, I don't have the attention span to read a policy. I just don't, right? So I don't even get involved in it. So it's like, hey, we work with the carrier, or if the client engages with somebody like yourself, I'll work through that person. But I really started getting an intimate understanding of the back end because my fiance wife is she's a personal injury paralegal, right? And she's been doing it, forever, right? And she went to law school, just passed the bar. Okay, she's actually walking at the first week of next month, right? Yeah, at like 38.
Brother, I just have to interrupt you and say kudos to her for taking that bar pregnant.
Oh yeah,
because
she's
I couldn't
animal.
Do it completely. Normal, male, healthy, young when I did it, 11 years ago. I struggled like crazy to get through that thing. It sucked. And for her to walk in there and do that pregnant,
yes.
It's
working. She was going to school, working full time, pregnant, and meanwhile, I got drafted over to the corporate side, to start running operations on a lot of our stuff. So I spent a lot of the time away, and I always joke around with her. I said, well, it's probably better that I wasn't there because she tells me I can be a handful. So
that's funny.
Yeah, so it's like, but then obviously once that was done and everything settled, I came back here, we got the baby coming. But, we talk all the time, and she's running me through these different scenarios through her law school stuff. And I'm really learning how important it is to document and all of the different angles. And I'll tell you what, in order to be able to sell, you got to be able to buy. And to be able to do either one of them, you got to negotiate. And the way that my brain is looking at this is like, okay, if I'm in a negotiation, I'm going to gather all the information. I'm going to figure out my leverage points. Okay, well, actually, no, this didn't happen. We did this, and hang on, here's the data, and here's where we're at. Yeah. And it all goes into the information gathering stage of the discovery phase, I think, as we say in the law firm, right?
Yes.
So With this, it's documenting all the pre-existing conditions, all stuff, or like you're saying, you've had a pre-existing back injury. Well, there's a hailstorm that happened here, 8 weeks ago, 9 weeks ago, and then there was one that happened a year ago, right?
Yeah,
right.
So the fun part about that, I had one particular situation that I found pretty interesting, is that there was a relatively new building. I think it was built it was only 2 years old. And they just got just massive hailstorm, 2.5, 3 inch, completely destroyed the roof. So I'm on the roof with the adjuster. The guy goes, "Yeah, there's obviously a lot of damage here." I go, "Mm-hmm. Yeah." He's like, I'd love to pay for it, but this is all damage.
Oh,
I go,
God,
when was the storm?" He goes, "It was actually 5 years ago." I go, "Really?"
That's ridiculous.
He goes, "Yeah." I go, "Oh, that's crazy. You know the building's only 2 years old, right?"
Yeah.
Oh my
He
God,
goes,
that was
"No,
good.
no, it's not." I go,
Right.
"Well, actually, here, if you take a look at Land Glide, I can show you that this is when the building was built. Yeah. If you'd like, I could call and get the public records for you and pull the building permits. But yeah, the building's only 2 years old." Well, I'm sorry, I must have been thinking about a different storm. We'll have to get back to you. They ended up paying for it, but it's like,
You see?
having that knowledge, going in, strapped with and doing your due diligence,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
I mean, and that's the big thing that. When I was out in the field on a regular basis, right, and I've been very fortunate enough to not have to go out out of necessity. I still like to go out for fun. Every once in a while, there's a storm in my backyard. Yuma just got hit the other day. I was making some calls for some of the guys, and but when I was out there, it's really interesting to go in and kind of be like a detective. Right,
Yeah.
so I'm doing all of the elevations. I'm checking all of your window panes. Is anything blown out? When I was doing residential years back, I got a basketball hoop bought for a client one time because there was dents in the rim. Mailbox and stuff like that. It's like, look, at the end of the day, you need to, if we're getting paid to do this, right? I expect me, my people, my company, all of our guys. It's a standardized training. It's like, look, you need to make sure you're gathering as much information as possible, because one or two things is going to happen. Either A, that information is going to get handed over to somebody like yourself with, if you're representing that client, or B, it's going to be handed over to the carrier. Mm-hmm. One of the two. And whether they choose to invoke an engineer, whatever the case is, fine, you can get your own stuff. But it's my job as a contractor to build out a packet, right, of just everything, property history. I've pulled building permits before.
Excellent.
Amazing.
Yeah, all this different stuff that is a necessity. And what that does is it speeds the process up. It's not going to be like light speed, like that one I told you about. Like that's the first and last time it's ever happened to me, right?
Yeah,
I've
it's
been doing
rare.
it for years, right?
Rare, yeah.
But having that going into it is really, really important. Not only for somebody like you guys, but for the client as well.
Oh, it's critical. And this is one thing that's critical also to understand, is that this is a very legal context. Whenever you're fighting or disagreeing with an insurance company, you can maybe resolve it, but if you don't resolve it, the only way to get anything done now is going into a courthouse. Mm-hmm. And that means that you have to talk to a jury, or you're gonna have to go talk to to a judge. And the burden of proof, which means who's obligated to prove, that we're right, or essentially that our position is the right position, is on us. It's on the it's on the insured. The insured must prove that there were physical damages to the property that occurred on or about the date of loss. That obligation is on them before the judge will even look at the carrier and say, "Well, now can you explain to me why it is that you're not paying for this?" Right? So this is if you go in there and you're unable to substantiate it. You say, "Oh, the damage on this day." You're not able to tie it together. You don't have reporting. You don't have evidence. You don't have anything to back it up. You don't have experts. You don't even get through the door.
Yeah.
So you're basically going up and presenting your case, and they're like, "We don't think you got anything. Get out of here."
Yeah, big time.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Really?
Yeah,
So they're just
you need
prejudging
to.
it before they even.
This is, you step in, you file a complaint, they'll file an answer, right? And what they'll do often is they'll move for summary judgment, and they'll say you failed to state a claim. And the judge is looking at you and saying, all right, well, show me that you have enough evidence to support.
Yeah.
It's not to support that it happened, but that you have probable cause. You have at least sufficient evidence to show me that, okay, a jury could potentially agree with you. And if we show up and they're saying, oh, it's pre-existing damage, and we have nothing, to show that this building wasn't damaged before the fact, we're at a massive disadvantage. And the carriers know that. And that's what also influences this, culture of litigation. Carriers know that if they're working with contractors or attorneys or public adjusters that do not have a lot of experience, that typically don't get this background work, that there's not a lot of due diligence done, they have an upper hand, and they take advantage of it.
Interesting. I haven't had a whole lot go to litigation personally, and maybe it's just I've been lucky, which is definitely a possibility. Maybe it's because we've presented the information the right way, we've documented everything.
Yes.
But the ones that have gone in, at least the ones that I've seen, it can be years.
Oh, yeah.
It's not an overnight thing.
It takes a long time.
Now, would you say out of the percentage of the deals that you guys are working, you know, how many would you say are actually going to lit?
It depends on the state.
Yeah.
Really?
Entirely.
Yeah, completely on the
So it
state.
sounds like Florida's going to be the highest percentage.
Guaranteed.
100%.
You're almost guaranteed to need litigation in Florida, unless you have an underpayment and we can go to appraisal.
Okay.
Right? Like this is if there's no dispute on scope in terms of coverage, then we can go to appraisal.
You want to talk about appraisal real quick?
Sure. So, you know, when I say appraisal, what I'm referring to is that, you know, we believe the value of the damages is X, and then the carrier believes that the value of the damages is Y. So we have a disagreement that is limited to just the value of the damage. How much is this going to cost? So we don't need to litigate over that, right? Because litigation takes 12 to 18 months if you're lucky. Instead, we can go to appraisal. And appraisal is good because what happens in appraisal is that the carrier gets to pick another third party, an independent appraiser. Then we get to pick an independent appraiser. They will go then and reach their own conclusions regarding the valuation of the loss. And if they can come to an agreement, it's a done deal. If not, it goes to an umpire, and the umpire essentially operates as the tiebreaker.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's the appraisal process.
That's if you're lucky enough to have a good policy with a good appraisal clause.
Yes.
Because a lot of appraisal clauses in their policies will say only the insurance carrier can invoke appraisal, or both parties have to agree.
Yes.
I've been hearing about that a little bit more frequently.
Right.
Yeah.
And I actually had one the other day, not the other day, I would say it's probably like 6 months ago. For me, the other day could be any time between now and the last 3 years, right?
Nice.
But we went to appraisal, and it went to an umpire, and the umpire ruled in, you know, the client's favor and said, okay, you got to pay I think it was like 760 or 800 grand, something like that. Okay. And the carrier said, no.
Yeah.
And I was talking to the client, and they're like, yeah, they said they're not going to pay. I go, can you do that?
That's ridiculous.
They're like, I have no idea.
This
I
is
said, okay.
so the carrier doesn't. So when you go to appraisal, you know they have a dispute regarding the value of the scope. But suppose that the appraisal came back at 800,000, and then the insurance company looks at that appraisal award and looks at the line items and believes that certain line items are just not covered,
Right.
you know, or then they apply depreciation and they throw in the deductible, and then they think, you know, that for whatever reason maybe now there's a defense or a denial that they can raise. They're entitled to do it.
Well, they came back at 120.
Yeah, well, no, this is oh my god.
They came back at 120.
Jesus.
Yeah.
That's not surprising. And it's really frustrating for insurers because they're so ready to receive that money. And then they learn that now we got to go spend 12 months fighting this regardless.
Yeah, and the big thing too is that like when I went through Hurricane Ian, which is by far, and I've worked a couple of hurricanes, nothing really like too severe, right? You know, I've done more like the hail, the wind. I did a couple derechos, stuff like that. But we are contracted with 4 multifamilies down there, right? And they're all HOAs, and each one's got their own president of the HOA, which is its own complications.
Right.
And then there's a board of directors, and then, you know, it's an older community, so they're constantly doing mutinies, and there's a new person that's running it and all this crazy stuff. But the big thing is that while this is all going on after a hurricane, the people are displaced. They're not in their home, right? And there was the one that I was working on in Port Charlotte, the hurricane kicked off a couple of tornadoes, and they went through and it peeled one of the houses. I'd say about a third, like a can opener. I mean, pulled the trusses, everything. And so I was down there because I was driving through like the Cat 1 part of it because I'm a maniac, right? And I was driving down there, and I came through the center of the state and then looped my way back up because I didn't want to get caught over in the bad stuff over, you know, south of Tampa. So I'm coming up there, and then I end up showing up the day after, and it was the wildest thing. There's people outside smoking cigarettes. They're riding their bikes. I mean, Florida people are built different.
Oh, forget it, dude.
Exactly.
They're used to it, man. That's it.
So I started talking to some of the people. I'm like, hey, you know, do you know that half of your roof's missing? And they're like, oh, yeah. I'm like, you guys gonna do anything? Well, we're waiting for our agent, and you know we're gonna wait for this. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't mean to be the bearer of bad news, but I don't think your agent's coming by anytime soon because he probably lives here.
Right.
He probably lives close, you know. And come to find out, the guy ended up showing up 2 weeks later. Finally came in because there was no cell service. I mean, you can't. You guys remember,
Right.
Yeah.
You know, no cell service, no nothing. So that took 2 weeks because they didn't have their policy, they didn't know what their coverages are, and then obviously nobody wants to work on it because it's like, look, you know, you guys are going to come out of pocket. The most recent one we got was 1.3 million. It's like that. You guys don't have that in your reserves, I guarantee it.
For sure.
Right. So you're delaying that by not having your policy and having all that stuff up front. But the craziest thing is I don't think one person left. They all wrote it out.
That's insane.
Every one of them.
Insane.
And I was talking to one woman, and she actually lived in the unit that had the roof ripped off. She goes, yeah, I was in there, and I heard some noise, so I decided to go downstairs into the basement. And, you know, on my way out, I saw the sky. And I'm like, that is.
God.
I'm like,
Oh,
this
Jesus.
she's an older woman. You know, I'm like, this girl's crazy, right? I mean, like,
yes.
but you know, a savage for that matter. Like, good for her, right? I mean, but you know, the whole time this is going on, you've got moisture in the walls. Some of the buildings were older; they had asbestos. It's like, you know, and they kept calling up like, Nick, what's going on? When is this going to happen? I'm like, well, you guys have a public adjuster you're working with, a firm that I've worked with in the past. They do a phenomenal job. However, you know, it's like you're saying, you're kind of at a disadvantage here because we're being reactive versus proactive. You know, you're a couple weeks behind the ball getting the claim filed, you know, and meanwhile they've only got, I think it was like 6 weeks or 8 weeks where they had their housing paid for. So now they're like, well, when can I move back in? I'm like, I don't know, because they have an extended coverage.
Right.
Yeah. And that's extremely frustrating to deal with because there may be no solution.
Right.
You know, you may be the solution. If you go into court, there's no solution there because court's going to take 12 to 18 months and you're stuck. And what's worse is that so many people do that where they wait on their carriers to show up and to do something. And then the carriers take advantage of that as well because if the carrier sees that you have failed to mitigate your damages, you know, even if they're, I don't have a dollar in my bank account to pay for mitigation. Well, that's not my problem. You just have a duty to mitigate, you know, and we see it all the time. We see it on both sides. If you mitigate, it's an issue. We don't want to pay the mitigation. If you don't mitigate, it's an issue because you didn't mitigate. You had a duty to mitigate, so we're not going to pay based on neglect. You see, and it's kind of like what you said earlier, which dovetails with what we opened with about this adjuster who got on the roof and said, "Oh no, this is from a storm 5 years ago."
Yeah,
they jump on the roofing systems. You know, they go adjust the loss, looking for the excuse that they can give the carrier to not pay. Like that's the paradigm that they enter with, and that's the unfortunate reality that hit me and then made me realize why it is that I do have a job, why it is that we are necessary in this environment. Otherwise, you know, these carriers, even in massive losses, we had a $10 million loss following Hurricane Irma in 2017. This was, and here's where you actually see even more issues, where Hurricane Irma did a number, but it didn't rip the roof off, right? When you have a situation where it's like, oh, this thing peeled the roof off, okay, it's harder to get away from that as a carrier. And if you do try and get away from it, bad faith is a little bit more prevalent.
Yeah.
right.
But suppose you had 90-mile-per-hour winds, like Irma did bring to parts of Florida, where this particular building was. It was a tile roofing system, and you didn't have catastrophic damages. You had a tile missing here and there. You had a little bit of displacement. You had some sliding tiles. This is where the insurance company likes to operate, right? Because there's so much plausible deniability for them to take advantage of. And you know what they'll do? Because we saw it again and again. It almost became religious. I would always subpoena them to see if there was an internal memo that somebody circulated to do this because everybody did it. They all went back to the building code. Carriers don't want to look at the building code, but now they did. You know why? Because the building code will say that an adhered tile system can withstand winds of up to 160 mile per hour. You know, so they'll say, oh, well, your roof could take 160 mile per hour winds, and you only saw 90, so these damages can't be related. You know, and this gets tougher because now you have something a little more subtle. You have water pouring in. You know, if you're a president of the HOA, then you've got a ton of owners who are complaining daily, asking you for a solution. You know, there is not enough in the reserves, and if you levy a special assessment, they're going to hang you to dry. So now you're just suspended in space.
Yep.
You know.
Yeah, it's an ongoing. That was a lot of the pressure that we were getting as a contractor was from the HOA president, who was continually. I mean, because when this whole thing went down, I was on site for, I want to say, 2 months, almost 2.5 months. I mean, like, we didn't know, because we had our Airbnb was like, 45 minutes outside of the blast zone, but we still didn't have power or any of that stuff. So I got really acclimated to taking cold showers. That was a nice experience for me. But I mean, we literally didn't know what our Airbnb looked like during the day. And we were out of there at 4:30 in the morning. We got on site, we set up, we brought generators, we brought gasoline, we brought water, we brought a Wi-Fi tower, we were helping people file FEMA applications, all the stuff. And even after that, I mean, there's only so much you can do, and we're continually getting brought into these board meetings of what's going on. It's just like, look, unfortunately, it's out of our hands, and the amount of pressure these HOA presidents are going through is unbelievable.
I don't know how they do that for free. You know, that's what I tell Anthony.
Wait, they don't get paid for it?
No, it's a volunteer job.
That
is
is
to be
bananas.
HOA. Maybe there's some HOAs that allocate something to pay the president, but this is, for the most part, it's all volunteer. Everybody on the board is volunteer. Like, you got to choose to want to do that. You know, and it's the worst positions. Aside from the fact that you don't get paid, you get all the crap.
Yes.
And everybody thinks it's your fault. Right? Everybody thinks, nobody understands how insurance works.
Yeah.
Why hasn't the insurance company paid? Why haven't you put a new roof on the building? Why is it I got to keep dealing with this?
Yeah.
You know, Anthony and I, it's fun when we do these. You know, it's not fun to see the pain that people are going through, but it's fun because it gets really heated and people get very upset. And there's a lot of back and forth. The last one we did.
Yeah, you're thinking about that one.
Yeah, just a couple weeks ago.
intense.
The president got challenged on the spot, and they said, "No, I'm here applying for president." You get me? I vote that today we have a quorum. We vote to vote me in as president, and the president who brought us in now, he didn't expect that, and he's just suspended in space, and they're going around taking votes to see if they're about to vote him out.
It was a mutiny.
And we're sitting there like, "Oh no!"
The guy who brought us in brought us in and there was a vote that happened, right? And they're doing it in front of us. I figured they'd have us in before or after.
Yeah.
Right?
Like, we don't care.
And we're there. We're like, oh my gosh, are we going to stay
Poor
here?
guys.
You know?
But he ended up getting elected again. You know, good for him. And they mean well. These
Yes.
presidents all mean well. They want to take care of the community.
They're doing their best.
They're just dealing with the natural factors at bay, right? Natural elements at bay.
Not only that, like when you're going through an extreme situation like that, like how often is it happening, right? I mean, like
Exactly.
you know, and like it may happen in Florida where you get a hurricane every once in a while and you're homeowner, but as far as like you are in charge of a community now, you are the person that everybody's coming to for the answers, and now you're in a leadership position during a crisis, and that is not something that's easy to deal with.
No, it's not. You know, and everybody's looking at you for the answers.
Yes,
And that's why I love the Overwatch program and these general risk management programs, right?
Yes.
Like it's like I said earlier, it's not about selling the program. This truly is. If you ask yourself, well, how do we win every time? How do we position ourselves in the best possible place to have success? This is necessary. If you're an HOA president, you need to have this because this is what you're going to be dealing with. Your frustrations are going to be born out of all the claims insurance companies are going to make that you're not going to be able to prove against.
Right.
So you have to litigate for 18 months to find some way to create leverage so that the insurance company ultimately pays. You get ahead of all of that by doing this work on the front end, right?
So you're also outsourcing the responsibility, right?
Yeah.
Like a lot of HOA presidents, they've never dealt with insurance. A lot, they're just volunteers, like you said, right? So they're outsourcing that responsibility, and often they don't know. So like, for example, we have HOA presidents that don't understand that when there's a major storm, it's a queue. Everyone's opening their claim and they're getting in line, right? So they'll wait a couple of days. They don't know. They give it to their agent. Their agent's busy fixing his house, and they don't understand what's going on. Right, when you outsource that stuff to other people, professionals, right, that are going to get that claim open the day after or within 12 hours of the storm, it puts a lot of the responsibility on them, right? We get called into board meetings all the time where they're like, look, ask the questions to these guys.
Yeah,
these guys are the guys in charge of it. And we are able to calm people down because we know what we're talking about.
And I love that. I love getting put into those environments because you can see the genuine peace that you can bring to people when you have information.
Yeah.
Right.
Because nobody has information, right? Like,
That's huge.
I don't want to name any carriers by name, but it's not your good neighbor, right? Like, that's the cute little lizard they put on TV. They're not. Everybody thinks, oh, we're backed up because we have insurance.
So you're saying sometimes you're not in good hands.
Sometimes,
Right.
often you're not in good hands, right? You have to make the environment. You have to create the environment for success in an insurance claim. Unfortunately, it's what you have to do because they're looking to find a way to not pay.
So that's a big thing too. So when Hurricane Ian happened, there was a massive shortage of materials. I'm sure you guys are well aware of this, right? So one of the things that when we decided to open up the Overwatch program is that it's like, all right, how do we go through and we set the stage for the best possibility to win? Number one is that, I always recommend that a client, gets involved with, NIA or somebody like, an attorney that can handle these types of things, that can evaluate the policy every single year and make sure, because, I don't know about you guys, but when I get an update on my iPhone, I'm not reading it. I'm not.
Right.
Now it was crazy. I was talking to an engineer the other day, and I used that pitch, and he goes, "I read it," and I'm like, "Well, you're one in a million, dude." Because no, I don't. Yeah. So when it comes to your policy that's getting renewed every single year, there could be changes, and if you've got a substantial commercial policy, it could be 4, 5, 6. I've seen one policy was over 1,000 pages, right? And there's a lot of endorsements and inclusions, and also the crazy stuff in there that I don't really know about. So it's like, hey, I recommend that they partner up with somebody like yourself who does the free service. You evaluate the policy, you get them under an MSA, a master service agreement. It's like, hey, if something happens, you know what? We'll go through, we'll file, we'll send somebody out there, we'll make sure everything's good, get a hold of your roofer, and when they're on our Overwatch program, what we're starting to do now is we're taking an inventory. We go out there, we do the site survey, we check, okay, cool. Do we need a core sample? How many layers are on this roof?
Yeah.
What are we looking at? How many squares is it?
Right.
And then we allocate the material. So we have warehouses all over the country, right? We got stock all over the place. We operate, nationwide with the exception of Alaska, right? And I try to stay away from California, not too friendly out there. But we go through, we stage materials. So it's like, all right, we've got 45 properties out here. We've got a total of, 37,000 squares of, TPO laid out so we can do a loose lay over the top of this, right? We've got all, because like that one I was telling you about where it peeled the roof off, we had to go out there and put trusses in, because, we had to put the trusses in, put down the OSB, and then go over the top and loose lay the whole thing. And it was interesting because I go over there in the, I forget what the building department goes by, like, you need to have a permit to do this. I said, no, this is emergency services. He's like, you're building. I go, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
I mean, we are building, but we are reacting to something. Right. We are securing this person's asset. Yeah. So they're like, well, I'm like, call the police then.
Yeah.
Call the police.
What did they have you do? Did they have you crush the building?
Leave
crusher
the thing
everybody?
open,
Yeah.
exposing people, to the elements. Come on,
And
that's
all of our
ridiculous.
personal items were in there and all that stuff. So
You have to protect.
yeah, so we stage everything out, and then we expect that somebody like you guys to step in where you evaluate the policy every single year, so that way, in the event that there is a loss, okay, and God forbid something does happen, that you have the adequate coverages.
Yes.
I ran into a client in Chicago in Elk Grove Village, right, and I mean it was a 3.25 inch hailstorm came through. Just had the roof done 2 years ago. Okay, so I mean, it was not in like terrible shape, but it was bad enough. I'm like, we should probably get somebody out here to look at this.
Right.
So he got with his attorney. They looked over the policy. He goes, yeah, you guys have a roof exclusion.
Jesus.
Oh my god.
First time
yeah.
I've ever seen it.
Oh yeah,
I'm sure you
they're
guys see it, but so it's making sure that that somebody like yourself is involved, right? Evaluate the policy. We go through, they're on our service agreement, which again is free service, nothing. You don't exchange for, hey, give me a shot to try to get this thing built for you. And we stage all the materials so that way we can get the claim process started, like you're saying. So when you're in the queue, you're number 1, 2, or 3. You're not 800, 900, or 1,000.
Yep, and you're showing up with everything you need.
Yes.
You see, and the policy review is so critical because there are various elements to making this thing work well. And it's documenting the conditions, looking at the roofing structure, doing everything before the fact. The envelope of the building, but the policy reviews every single year. Nobody's looking at them, and in nothing to insurance agents, but even a lot of insurance agents don't even understand what's happening in a lot of these policies. We realize that because we give information after the loss occurs, and the surprise that we get from people when they learn that, oh, this is what I'm dealing with, and sometimes it's extreme, like what you just said, a roofing exclusion. We've had that happen, and it's a hard thing to swallow. But sometimes it's a little more subtle. And Anthony just had a case now.
I got a good example.
Oh, do you?
I got
Please
two
go ahead,
examples.
and I got one too as well.
I got one with my in-laws.
Okay.
They're on our MSA. Okay, so they just got their insurance renewed. They went from citizens to now tip-tap. Right, they were lucky enough to be
Which is a good
forced
thing.
to switch, which is a good thing.
Yeah, tip-tap's way
And
better.
so we looked at their policy, and they're underinsured, right? For a fact, they're underinsured. And I was looking at their policy, and it said that if you're underinsured by, it's a co-insurance penalty by 80%, then, or it's not a co-insurance penalty rather. It was if you're underinsured by 80%, then it would be valued at ACV, not RCV, right? And I'm talking about very underinsured. And I had to let them know. I'm like, look, this is storm season's coming.
Yeah.
Right. I'm letting you know. I would recommend, and I know their agent. It's actually I grew up with this guy.
Okay.
But he just doesn't understand it as well. It's not his fault.
it's not his fault.
He just doesn't understand what that means, the implications. The other one you're thinking about. Yes.
I was thinking about that one, and I'll come in for a second, and I'll let you explain how you did it. But Anthony took on a case, and he was running it. It wasn't a massive loss. I think it was a $500,000-$600,000 loss, and the carrier comes back with like $120,000 payment and like a $350,000 coinsurance penalty.
Ooh.
This is massive coinsurance penalty. They bring in some valuation showing the building was worth way more, than anybody ever expected, and essentially for them it was a done deal. This is done, and I'll tell you. For a lot of clients, it would have been a done deal at that point in time.
Right.
A lot of clients would have seen the valuation, would have said, wow, my property's worth this, I'm underinsured, there's a $300,000 penalty, plus the deductible, I'm getting $100,000. All right, let's see what we're going to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know how Anthony, what did you do?
First of all, I had to convince them because they were like, yeah, my value is worth it. My property's worth this. Like, they were excited about it. I'm like, you shouldn't be excited about this.
Yeah, that's a bad thing.
Because you need to change your roof. Like, they knew they needed to. So after I explained to them, like, okay. The carrier, when they did their valuation report of the property, they valued the whole thing as light manufacturing, right? Every square inch of the place, which is more expensive. When I asked my client, it turns out maybe 10% of the actual property was light manufacturing. The rest of it was essentially storage. So when you change the valuation like that, in our eyes, there was not only was there zero coinsurance penalty, I think they were actually a little bit over-insured, right? The carrier argued with us for 4 or 5 months, and they changed their position 5 times.
Yeah.
Yep.
Incrementally until we finally got it. We eliminated the coinsurance penalty.
The entire coinsurance penalty was eliminated.
Really?
The whole coinsurance penalty.
If it was up to them, they would have been like, oh, I guess so. And they definitely wouldn't have fought it all the way through, right? It's just people don't know.
You have to fight these things, and that's the thing. It's like there is pull. Carriers are looking at this. They're used to the dynamic of negotiation. So when a carrier comes in, if they think they owe $1 million, they're going to offer you $200,000,
Right.
and maybe you ask for nothing, but maybe you ask for more, and then they expect you to ask for more, and maybe you'll work your way to the middle. But who understands that dynamic? It's only the professionals in the space, right? Anybody coming at this without experience doing this, they don't understand this, and then they get bulldozed, right?
Well, not only that, you guys did the due diligence. You did the homework. It's like,
Right.
And here's the way that I look at this too is like, you know, obviously we're talking about everything's a for-profit business. You know, what you guys do, what I do, what everything, we try to level the playing field across the board for everybody. But when it comes down to brass tacks, it's who's right. Right. So, like, yeah, obviously people could posture, they could position, they could change. But it's like, look, if I see data that I don't think is accurate, I'm going to question that data. I'm going to go in, I'm going to get with the engineers, I'm going to pull the building code, I'm going to look at the building code, I'm going to look at the permits, I'm going to look at all the stuff like you guys did, right? And it's like, hey, look, like this doesn't seem right. There's no way. This doesn't make sense. Let's take a look at the zoning. Let's see what we've got in there, right? So it's again, it's doing that due diligence. Now, that's obviously not something that you would really catch ahead of time. In a policy review, it's like, okay, cool, it looks like this is our value, whatever the case is. But then it goes through, it's like, wait a minute, hang on.
Right.
Now this is something we got to have a conversation with. And I'm guessing you guys had a favorable outcome on that.
Oh yeah, it was
Yeah,
fantastic.
we got everything we needed.
We got 100% of the recovery. Anthony was able to achieve that, and you know the client was very, very happy. A lot of this could have been foreseen at the get-go, right? Because when you see these co-insurance penalties, it puts it into perspective. Okay, now I have to consider what's the true value of my property. Is it sufficiently insured?
Yes.
And this is just under the context of a co-insurance penalty. There are so many limitations. There are a lot of states where like matching is appropriate, right? This is, you know, states like in Ohio or Florida or where else do we see that a lot? In California. This is, you get matching. Well, in many of these states, you're also allowed as an insurance company to sell matching limitations into your policy.
Let's talk about matching real quick.
Yeah, sure. So matching means that there are damages to your roofing system, and when you repair those damages, it'll result in an unmatched environment. So in other words, if I fix these tiles that are perhaps new that I'm installing, my old tiles are maybe discontinued or they're different, and now there's not uniformity. Right? You're looking at the roofing system. Its pre-loss condition was a uniform roof, and now its post-loss condition now, after you've gone through it, is, well, now you have a multi-color roofing system. That's a very common example where matching comes in. If you have matching, you're able to say, well, no, you're going to have to repair the undamaged portions in order to ensure that the whole thing matches and is uniform. Right. And this can be very expensive. This can get tremendously expensive, especially when not only just with roofing, but with windows. Right, like this is you bring in new windows, big time. Windows and glazing is massive. I've never had a carrier look at a window. If we don't direct the carriers to the windows, if we don't, produce objective findings from engineers showing why the hermetic seals have been impacted by the wind, if we're not bringing that evidence forward, an insurance company will never adjust the loss and offer you to pay a window. True. I've never seen it happen. They're not going to do it.
That's part of the reason. That's part of the problem that a lot of property owners and maybe poor PAs and poor attorneys that don't know what they should be doing. Right. They need to present the damages, all the damage to the insurance company. So many times we receive a file from a PA or just a property owner that they get their claim denied, and we look back and we're looking at these photos, or we have an inspector go out and they have damage to their windows or damage to their siding, and we present to the insurance company. They say, well, why didn't you tell us? Right. We didn't know this before, so then they get skeptical. Right. It's cleaning up the file. Exactly.
It all it does is it cracks that door open of doubt. Yeah. And then that's when it becomes an issue. And I know that we dealt with the matching thing a while back, where it was in Colorado. It was a pretty massive hailstorm. The guy had a slate roof, and he had been doing repairs because it was a relatively old roof, but it was still insured. And he was doing repairs and pulling slate out of a boneyard and putting different, so when the hailstorm came through, right, the insurance company goes, well, yeah, we'll go through and we'll replace the ones that are damaged. And the Republican judge is like, well, it's matching. He goes, this guy obviously doesn't care. Yes. He's been doing, Mickey Mouse repairs all over the place. I mean, there's 25 different color tiles up there. Like, why are you going to hold me a different standard than that? And they lost.
They lost?
Yeah.
No kidding.
They get it overturned because the client had been making haphazard repairs, and I'm not talking like a little bit of a variance. I mean, it looked like a Dalmatian. Yeah. And I'm like, this is a beautiful, it's a $2 million home. Jeez. Right? And so the carrier goes out there, and maybe the PA just wasn't able to overturn it. That is definitely a possibility. Right. But they came in there, and the carrier's like, look, I understand that, you guys want to go through and you want to hold us to the standard, but the roof, basically, as far as we can tell, is a polka dot roof. Right. So we're going to go through and continue the trend, and we're going to replace these 65 pieces of slate, and you guys have a nice day.
Brutal. Yeah. You see, and that's tricky, because it's also an optics thing. You get in front of a jury, and you're trying to go to a pre-loss condition, and then you show photos of pre-loss, and it's like a Dalmatian roof. Yeah. It's hard to sell. But then you have to find another strategy, right? Because when you have a situation where you have a Dalmatian roof, that means that a homeowner likely is unable to take on the full replacement of the roofing system.
True.
Right? They're doing their best. And at that point in time, maybe you don't have matching because pre-loss condition wasn't matching, but maybe you have more. You have something else, right? You have a roofing system that is severely battered. That's why it's got so many repairs to the point that it looks like a Dalmatian. There's only so much that you can continue while also staying consistent with the building code, right? Building code doesn't want that. Governments don't want to incentivize that. A government wants to incentivize you to fix your roofing system.
Especially if you got an HOA.
Right, especially if you have an
Yes.
HOA. Oh, absolutely. And even some cities. There's cities that will impose violations on you. I've got violations against clients for having blue tarps or having improper repairs on systems where they don't have an HOA. You have a city that regulates, the aesthetic of the city.
Interesting.
And they're not okay with that. So then we look at the building code and we say, well, can we continue to replace these? Can we continue going back to the boneyard? And what's interesting is that 9 times out of 10, you absolutely cannot. Right, you look at the Florida Building Code. Florida Building Code requires you to source a tile, and it has to be in its original packaging with the manufacturing instructions.
Interesting.
Right, yes, and this needs to be inspected before it gets put on a roofing system. So that I would argue that even going to a boneyard and picking up tiles is inappropriate under the Florida Building Code. You get me? In all contexts. This is, and the same is true for so many building codes, because a lot of the building codes, they're really cut from the same cloth, right? So there's always a format. There's always an argument. And you asked us earlier, do you do anything else? Is it any kind of other litigation? Is just this? It's just this, because in order to be good at this, you have to understand the subject matter, so well.
Yes.
Right? If we go up against a defense firm that does a little bit of everything, we're already at an advantage. Right? Because they won't necessarily know. We're dealing with these arguments every single day.
Well, it's a niche specialty,
Yes,
right?
right.
And you become the absolute best in your specialty. And I remember when I first got into, the contracting side of things, right? And I would go out, and there's just so much stuff that you can do, and there was so much knowledge, and it's just, I got overwhelmed, and I tried to do a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit, and after a while, I was like, look, I can be really, really good at servicing the client after some type of, natural disaster or hail event or whatever the case is. And I got really, really, really good at that. I got good at documenting. So then once that happens, like, cool, now I can kind of start expanding out. So let's start talking about fluid applied membranes. Let's start talking about the Overwatch program. Let's start forecasting out. But everything still has its same finite goal. It's servicing the client after some type of weather event. Right. So you get really, really good at that. And that's a lot of time, you look at there's a roofing contractor, I'm not going to use their name, but they do all just retail stuff. They're huge, you guys know what I'm talking about. These guys are just, they're animals. And the way that they put their agreements together for the retail stuff is they've got exclusivity over the right. They've got their own white label roofing materials, and that's what they do. And I would never try to mess with those guys because they'll crush me, But when it comes to something like this, especially with the weather patterns that are going on right now, I mean, there's a huge need for good licensed contractors and attorneys and public representation, because we've been noticing a pretty large uptick in the last couple of years, right? I know last year was a record-breaking hail year, right, across the country. This year, we're already starting off, and I'm going to nerd out a little bit on the weather, right?
So we love it.
Yeah, so I went through and I started researching. I started researching the El Nino and La Nina, right?
Oh,
and this always brings me back to that Chris Farley skit. I am El Nino. All other storms, but we were in an El Nino for way longer than we normally are, right? And then, there's a transition period known as an Enzo event. And as this transition goes on, we transfer into a La Nina, and usually at 7 months, 8 months a year. Well, this is happening rapidly, right? So the currents in the ocean are transitioning, going the opposite directions. Now, what we're noticing also is that there's a difference in wind shear, a difference in temperature, and all that stuff. And all of this erratic changes is what's causing these massive hail events that are occurring nationwide. Furthermore, what we're noticing is that when you're looking off of the coasts, what causes the rapid intensification of any type of hurricane is going to be how far, and just in simple terms, is that how far out is the warm water and how deep is it?
Yes.
Right. Okay. So right now, like what you guys are talking about, how it feels like August in Miami, going to Miami,
Nice.
But it's true. It is true, because what we were looking at is I started looking at this about, for a while, but noticing 3 months ago, and they're like, hey, we're 2 to 3 months ahead of schedule for some of these warm water and these warm currents and the humidity. So they started looking at the weather patterns that were happening in 2020. In 2020, there was 37 named storms. Not all of them made landfall, obviously, but 37 named storms. And they're looking at where the warm water was and how deep it was, and they're almost doubling that right now.
That's
right?
insane.
Right. So they're saying that we could run into Category 4, Category 5 hurricanes, 3 to 4 of them. Right now, there is. I don't want to freak anybody out, right? Because there's a lot of stuff that if a volcano erupts or something happens and it creates any type of wind shear, that's the one thing that can really derail a hurricane. Any type of wind shear, they're powerhouses, they're massive, but you get a little bit of wind, game over, shuts them down, right? But if it continues to be stable, like it is right now, really chill, and those things come in and it hits that warm water, is where it can go from a Cat 1 to a Cat 4 real fast.
Quickly.
Exactly, and you get surprised. Right, and that's where the catch-22 is, right? It's like it's making sure that you're paying attention, making sure that you're covering your property, making sure you've got your policy analyzed, making sure you've got somebody that's going to stage the materials, make sure you're good to go. And I hope I'm wrong. I really do.
Right.
I mean, there's plenty of hail, there's plenty of stuff. Hurricanes are not fun to work.
No.
They're not fun. It's a necessary, it's a necessary job, right? Because somebody's got to go through and take care of that. I remember I worked a couple of hurricanes in Louisiana, which, Lake Charles, man, those poor people.
They're still in disarray.
Oh, really? I haven't been down there in a long time.
It's still chaos.
Awful.
And there's so much litigation. You see, Louisiana's another state like Florida where you see a ton of litigation over this stuff.
Yeah, and
unfortunately.
you just keep rebuilding, and then it just, every 5 or 8 years, it just
comes again. Yeah.
You got it again. And hey, look, I know that the food is great. I love going down and having fun down there and all this stuff. But it just goes to show that the weather is changing, and making sure that you're aware and paying attention is a huge deal. So how long have you guys been in business?
So I've been doing this for 10 years, since 2015. Before that, I did a lot of commercial real estate litigation, a lot of building code litigation. So I've always been in real estate and construction. And I stepped into this really out of curiosity, taking advantage of an opportunity. And I fell in love with that. I really fell in love with that. I like the subject matter is fun. Being able to take depositions of these field adjusters, really, peel back the onion is something that's really enjoyable. You get to do all the fun stuff of litigating, all the things that attorneys like to do. But you are a step removed from some of the really difficult stuff that a lot of the other practice areas will expose you to, right? It's not like litigating property insurance is very different, like perhaps litigating an immigration case where if I lose, this father is not going back home to see his children, right?
Oh, yeah, that's tough.
I'll tell you I litigated a case because a period of time where it was a little bit more open-ended, especially at the very beginning, and I was more willing to take on different files. And I litigated a case that was horrible, where you had grandpa and grandma driving in the front seat, and then you had little girl sitting in the back seat, and they were it was in Cape Coral, and they were making a left turn to enter into a community, and when they were making that left turn, they got hit head on.
Oh, no.
Yes, grandpa and grandma were fine. Little girl is paralyzed for the rest of her life. Take on the case. You'd expect them to turn over and pay policy limits. Defendants said that grandma and grandpa were driving on the wrong side of the road. Right? No cameras, no way to prove otherwise. And just having to explain this to grandma and grandpa, to tell them that, oh no, they think it's your fault, and the pain that it would cause them. I was depressed and suffered so much over this one case, right? That ultimately it was it was an excellent result, but there's no such thing as an excellent result in that kind of situation.
No.
It's horrible nonetheless. So this is an area of law that, I enjoy, that we enjoy. We get to litigate, we get to have all of the fun, and there are people suffering, but nobody's dying, right? Nobody's,
exactly.
like, everybody at the end of the day will still get to go home, and that's a nice thing for us.
Yeah. How long have you guys been working together?
We've been working really heavily together now for about a year. But Anthony and I have been affiliated because Anthony would work at a different firm that did the same thing we did for several years.
We hated him.
And they did.
I hated him, but then I met him, and we instantly hit it off. And at that time, I knew we were going to work together. At least that was always going to be my plan. And it's been going well.
Yeah, and they didn't like us because, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but we are really big now, too, and Anthony reconciles with this tremendously, that we want to deliver an excellent service, but we also want to have superior customer service.
Yes.
Right? Like, we need to be very good. In addition to being good at the law and in our practice area, we need to be excellent with our clients, driving information, being constantly updating. And this is a hard thing to balance, but it was a philosophy we had. And the firm he worked at before was a traditional firm that just doesn't put any eggs in that basket, right?
Yeah.
So we had a lot of clients in common that would complain about that firm. Yeah. And I think that they started to kind of hate us because they were just like, everybody's always talking about Mario and the other
exactly.
firm.
That's exactly how I went. It was frustrating on my part because I was like, I want that.
Yeah.
Right? But it was never an
got a
emphasis.
little envy.
It's not even envy. It's just that this is what you have to do.
Yeah.
And just law firms in general, I mean, there's great law firms out there,
Right.
but law firms in general, it's not you don't think of law firms as customer service based, right? You think
No.
of it as,
Yeah, that's true.
you know, suits and ties,
Yep.
and I'm going to court, and
Yeah.
that's it. Not a lot of feedback, not a lot of calling them back saying, hey, here's what's going on with your case. No technology, very much outdated.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that I
Big
did
time.
notice that. And that
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
that was a big thing that I noticed when, I was talking to my fiance about some of the technology, the stuff that they use, and then same thing where there's certain trades, there's certain professions that are like way in the past.
Yes.
I mean, you go through, you talk about like when I did the tire business when I first came in, we used a DOS-based platform called Tire Pro. It's MDMOV.
Oh,
There's no
God.
analytics. There's no there's no nothing.
Terminal, right? Like,
Right.
this is-
And now we're getting into it where we use a program called Monday, and we import all of our CR. Yeah, you guys we use okay.
Yeah.
So so we could look at it, but I could look at the analytics of how fast is the file moving. When
Yes.
how long is it taking my estimating team to get somebody on site to do the site survey and the core sample? What is the turnaround time for response on this particular thing? And now you've got this data and these analytics, right, where you can really start moving forward. So now you've got that. And what I do is I use that as like a temperature gauge, right? So when you're driving a car, you've got your gas gauge, you've got your oil pressure, you've got your coolant temperature and stuff, and you can't really drive. It's like the same thing of having a P&L or profit and loss statement. In order to drive your company, you got to know what's going on. You can deep dive, you can see, okay, so I know, hey, I got to dive into this, I got to dive into that, and once you've got that ironed out, you can really start fine-tuning the operation. And 100%. It's something that my dad told me a long time ago, and it stuck with me, right? I'll tell you, I learned so much from that dude, right? Everything is a commodity these days, right? When we were in the tire business, there's 40 people that are doing tires, there's 100 roofers, there's 9 million attorneys, there's all these people back in the day, right? Back in the day, service wasn't great. You go back to, and I wasn't around, but this is what he tells me. That you go into like the 70s, 80s, 90s, you go sit down, it's 30 minutes before somebody brings you a cup of water. He's like, but that was the norm. Yeah. Now, businesses evolved to the point where everybody's good.
Yes.
Right? You can expect a regular level of service, but since everybody is doing a lot of the same stuff, everybody price matches, right? When you go to a store, you can negotiate, you can do, but what really is the differentiating factor now is the customer service.
Big time.
Exactly. It is
big time.
Do I feel, especially if somebody's trusting you with an asset,
yeah,
right, that's worth 10, 15, 20, 30 million dollars, right? Or even if it's $100,000, it doesn't matter, right? So having that client facing ideology where it's like, and I talked to our COO Andrew all the time. He goes, it's customer first.
Yeah.
Yes.
It is customer first. Like, look, if you abide by that, if you abide by customer first, you will always make the right decision. 100% of the time, because if you could take care of your client, right, if that is your number one thing, you will figure out a way to make it work. And if you can't, for some reason, the policy, whatever the case is, how do I best set you up for the next time?
Exactly.
Right? Like if we're you guys, let me ask this. I'm sure you guys have a lot of reoccurring clients. I mean, you guys have been around for a while, especially with, how much how awesome Mario is, right? I know you're getting there. Just teasing.
Yeah.
But,
Anthony's 2.0, bro.
He's you're the suit.
That's right. That's right.
But you guys have a lot of these reoccurring clients. How often are you? I'm assuming you guys do the policy reviews. Every single year. Have you noticed any, let's say, accelerated changes? Let's say over the last 5 years. Like, hey, are you seeing a lot of more ACV in the last year? Are you seeing a lot more co-insurance in the last 3 years?
Yeah,
big time. We're seeing a ton more caps. They're capping things all over the place. Yeah. We're seeing depreciation schedules for roofing systems. We're seeing not only tons of new policy language getting thrown in where there's more ACV, there's more limitation, there's more exclusion, but we're also seeing a ton of legislative changes. Across the nation, there's legislative changes that make this more difficult for consumers, for insureds. It's what we see. And going back to that other point you were making about just business in general, you nailed it on the head with that, because that's so accurate, right? Like I like to listen to Alex Hormozy a lot. I think he's
great.
He's awesome.
Yeah.
And, he talks about the reorder business. Mm-hmm. He talks about building a business that is where the product and your delivery is so good that why would your clients ever have to go anywhere else?
Yes.
And the way that Anthony and I like to think is that we put that concept at the forefront of our head. So we'll get in front of a whiteboard and we'll say, okay, the reorder business. What kind of service do we need to deliver so that our clients never want to go anywhere else? Because they'll never get the same level of white glove service that we'll offer. And we will then outline what that business looks like.
Yes.
And then we take that model, and that is what we push every single day in our environment. You see, it's very difficult to maintain consistency in terms of especially when you begin to scale.
Yes.
Right now, when you've just got 2 or 3 people Listen, when I was on the phone, me and Anthony can jump in anything. But now there's a lot happening. We expect the same level of result. How do you do it? And the only way to do it is with what you were explaining earlier. You need analytics. You need
Yes.
key performance indicators. Right, Anthony, when he jumps in and he goes into his morning huddle, he's got 10 or 12 key performance indicators that everybody knows we're going to go through.
Yes.
You get me? And then we're going to move through this. And if there's an issue, I shouldn't have to catch it. You guys are all going to know that there's an issue, and it's the first thing you should be telling me,
exactly.
right? Because we're so reconciled with what these performance, indicators are. And this you'll do per department, right? And like that, you're able to scale an organization that can deliver that high-value customer service and high-value support right at the same time.
Yeah, you develop a culture around it.
Which is
100%. That's one of the things that I learned. Mario taught me the work on the business, not in the business.
Yes.
And KPIs and all that. That's exactly that. If I see a problem with the KPIs, first of all, that's the only way to identify it, unless it's a very specific problem. And then if I have to go in and jump in and do that one thing that's taking me away from everything else.
Yes.
Right. If I have KPIs and I can identify problems in the macro, that will allow me at least to create procedures to fix those problems in the future.
Yeah.
That's the only way to do it long term. Because
Yeah.
if not, you're going to be running circles.
Well, you got to be able to see it from 40,000 foot, right?
Yes.
And
You
so
must.
when I was in the, again, I talk about tires a lot, but when I was running, I was doing almost like I would get put into a location that had a little bit of trouble, and I needed to go in and fix it. And the first one that I went into, I was like 22, 23 years old. And which seems like forever ago, and we didn't have the analytics. We were having difficulty getting the getting the P&Ls out, right away. So I was kind of driving blind. And also, I was inexperienced. I didn't know anything about the commercial tire business. Zero, right? So I go in there, and I kind of developed this philosophy. I'm like, all right, look, every single time something goes sideways, I just got to figure out, okay, why? First off, fix the problem, right? Put the fire out. Okay, cool, good. Next, it's like, okay, what happened? Why did it happen?
Exactly.
Put an SOP.
That's the way to
right?
Yeah.
And this is probably not the best way to run a business. Again, I'm a lot more, I wouldn't say sophisticated, might not be the right word, but a lot more, versed on how to do it from the 40,000 foot. Is that my philosophy was you can only make so many mistakes.
Right.
And if every time something happens, whether the tire didn't get delivered, or a retread didn't go out, or this reconditioned wheel didn't get taken care of, or a tire didn't get bolted on right, or whatever the case is, if you implement a new SOP every single time and make sure you bring the staff in, you do your huddle. Hey, this is what we're doing. Here's the changes. Here's the updated manual, which now we've got digital, which is great. I could just read this.
Yes.
You can only make so many mistakes until you've made all the mistakes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, through doing it the manual labor way, I guess, would be the best way to do it. Now understanding that and being able to see from the 40,000 foot, establishing those KPIs, figuring out how to run your business from an elevated level, because somebody in your guys' position or my position, I run a lot of the operations, with all of our programs and the training and stuff like that. If there is something where I'm getting a phone call and there's an issue because something's not getting handled, it is taking me away from something that's more than likely very important. Right. So being able to settle that out is good. And then also developing the culture. You guys read
Big time.
Extreme Ownership. Jocko Willink.
Fantastic.
Phenomenal
I
book.
love that book.
I started a book club at the company recently.
No way.
Yep,
That's the one
That's
to
awesome.
read, bro.
Yep, it
Extreme
is.
ownership.
Yes, you start off with Extreme Ownership, and then Leadership Strategy and Tactics, which is his newest one that came out. Highly recommend it. It is.
I gotta pick that up.
It's. I don't want to say it's better, but it serves a different purpose, right? So started the book club, and now I'm getting these people in because when it comes to the Extreme Ownership, it's we've got a lot of reps across the country. They're 1099, right?
Yeah.
So they look to corporate for this or this. A lot of these guys don't understand. It's like, look, this is my business, right? I'm out there to serve. This is my client. These are the people that I'm trying to help out. And by taking that Extreme Ownership, it develops that culture where it's like, if something hits my desk, if this goes on, whether it's my job or not, if it's outside of my review, I'm going to try to figure out a way to figure it out.
Yes.
Or I'm going to go out of my way to find the person to get it taken care of.
That's it.
At Restore Masters, you guys have some reps out there that absolutely adopt that principle.
Yes.
I mean, you have some people there that I was
great people.
astonished to hear the kind of operations that they have just themselves. It's insane. It's like they have their own mini offices. I love it. I think
Yes.
it's amazing.
Yeah.
I've never seen that anywhere else.
You figured that out, and that's such a key thing because this is, I don't know if the newer generations or we're just seeing it more where nobody wants to take ownership over anything, right?
Yeah.
Everybody wants to blame somebody else for it. No, it's not my job. It's not my fault. Well, what can I
It's
do?
everywhere right now, man. It's
Oh my
tough.
God. And this is, and honestly, from a business perspective, I like it because it just means that I have less competition. Because that is the most terrifying competitor is a competitor that's ready to stand right in the middle of the problem. You get me, put it on their shoulders and figure out a way through.
Yes.
That's like, that's the caliber that's where we like to play. That's how we like to operate. But there is an absence of it.
Yeah.
Right. In the
It's
industry.
team players. That I know. I can tell you right away if somebody's not going to last on our team because it doesn't conform with our culture, where they say that's not part of my job description.
Right.
Right.
Oh,
That's
God,
when I
oh,
know.
man.
I'm like, okay, you're not.
If any of my employees see that, that is Anthony's echoing, something that we believe so fundamentally, and it's that nothing will annoy me more than to hear, oh, well, the client was calling and nobody picked up. Well, that wasn't my case.
Right.
Oh my God. Like we have to operate as a unit, right?
Yeah.
They're all our cases, right? But this failure is a failure on all of us. It's not a failure on the one, rep that maybe took an extended lunch, right? Whatever. Whether he should not have done that is outside of the point.
Yes.
Right.
We're the ones that end up looking bad, right? When we
Yes.
don't put our foot forward.
Luckily, we've gotten to the point where as soon as somebody new is onboarded, they see it immediately.
Yep.
Right.
Right. They see it immediately. There's no getting around it. If they don't want that, they probably leave themselves.
Yes.
Right.
That's a big thing too.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, it's great. It's great. I don't have to say it. It's just there. It's known.
Yeah, and that's a big thing too. Is when we do our interviews and we bring people in, we're looking for not necessarily, I wouldn't even call them interviews, but it's like, hey, we're bringing people on that are interested in joining the business, and they're coming in, we're talking with them. It's like, look, when they come in, you are in a pretty high-end environment, right? I remember I go in and I'll visit other locations every once in a while, I'll talk with different people, and I'll go in, and if the partner's not sharp, yeah, I'm gonna say something, and our CEO Ivino too is the same thing. Is like, look, you got to be the best dressed person in that business. People when we come in, we're meeting in the mornings and we're getting our stuff together. I'm there an hour and a half early. You're not gonna beat me to the office. And there's been a couple of people that, they'll start coming in and they want to learn the business and all this stuff, and then after 2 days later they just stop showing up. I'm like, yeah, you can't hang, man.
That's it.
Can't hang. It's like, hey, look, it's everybody's here 1099. You don't need to come in. You can do whatever you want. We don't go out and sell. I mean, like we were talking about earlier, most of our guys, when I was on the road 8 months out of the year. Right, 8 months out of the year. I never met up with anybody to have a meeting or none of that stuff, but there are particular times like, hey, look, we go through, we do a morning brief, and if you want to go there, go. If not, not. No problem. I pay for an office. It's out of my money, all the stuff. Like, you come in if you want to meet and do, we do. And the people that come in, the people that are there regularly, they come in, they're a part of the culture, they fit in. I mean, I've had people show up in sweatpants. I'm like, hey, man, look, why don't you go home for the day? Like, this isn't for you, right? I mean, like, you're going to come in and really... You gotta build that environment, right?
Of course.
Yeah, it's like the same thing, right?
It's the intangibles.
Well, yeah, I mean, you go into you go into somebody's house and people are smoking cigarettes and they're wearing their shoes and their stuff. I was like, what are you gonna do? You're gonna throw your stuff on the floor, whatever. You go in, everything's nice, pristine. I'm not even gonna ask if I gotta take my shoes off.
Right.
I know I gotta
right.
take my shoes
Yeah.
off.
Exactly.
That's the type of environment you gotta build.
Excellent.
So guys, again, I appreciate you coming on. We're coming a little bit over an hour. Not too bad.
Too fast.
It flew, dude. It flew. So Anthony Martin, thanks again for coming on. Where can people find you?
Well, you can really look us up at nia.law and find us. You can email us, Mario at nia.law, Anthony at nia.law. We are big on relationships. People get tired of hearing me say that. We're so big on it. We want to connect with you. We want to work with you. We want to help you improve your business, right? Like, this is the first relationship that ever sent us a case is still sending us cases today, right? Like,
Beautiful. I love it.
Yeah, that's the way that we operate. So, connecting with us really any which way and starting a conversation is the best way to start.
Cool. Awesome. Again, thanks for guys coming. Thanks for checking out the Overwatch channel. See you next time.